Sir Ken Robinson, one of the greatest reformers in education, he just recently passed away. He is one of those wise voices begging us to hear him from the grave. We embrace ourselves as free, but have we embraced ourselves as brave? Ken Robinson spoke of this concept of a quest. It's a medieval word for a special sort of journey that doesn't have a defined destination. Instead, when you set off on a quest, you usually don't know where you're going, what exactly you're looking for, or how it's all going to play out. But you set out with intention on a mission called by a higher purpose. So I believe right now we are all on a quest. It's likely that you're here tuning into this event because you believe that there is something better for education, but you don't know the final destination or even the points along the way. And so it feels like we're sitting here at the base of a giant mountain, education, and we're looking up wondering, where is this quest going to lead us? And how in the world are we going to start scaling this thing? So then what is the higher purpose? What is it that's compelling us to do the impossible? It's our children. As we set off on our quest, we've talked about it before, and I'm going to say it again. We need to know the enemy that we're going to encounter along the way, because it isn't the education system. It isn't teachers, lack of funding, disunity, or policies. It isn't even COVID, though COVID is certainly the reason we have begun our quest. Our common enemy right now is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear that our children will be a year and a half behind, anxiety over the survival of our families to just make ends meet, fear of failing. But here's what I know. Fear is a terrible leader. It's going to lie to you every time and convince you that you aren't good enough, smart enough, and it will make you doubt that real positive change is possible. Fear is whispering to each of us right now, and it's the one that's stealing from our kids. And so, in spite of fear, our quest is our intentional search for what education will be for our children tomorrow, next week, next year, and beyond. I began this quest long before COVID. I founded the Big Idea Project nonprofit in 2014 because I saw a problem in our schools. High school students were suffocating under the weight of education, and I wondered, how could we unleash the potential of students to be leaders? I was naive. I did not realize how big this mountain is. But the thing about naivety is that when you don't know, you aren't afraid. And so I began to scale one step at a time. And I clung to the belief that there must be other teachers and other leaders who shared my hunger to set students free. Along the path of the last 7 years, helping teachers to provide transformational, experiential learning that shapes the whole student, Big Idea Project's learning led to what we now call the BIP way. It's a set of principles and practices and perspectives that, when we string them all together and they're activated, they open up young minds and hearts to new possibilities. Do you want to know a secret? Along the way, I discovered what the Holy Grail is. It's the thing that we're hoping to find when we get to our final destination. It exists in every single young person, no exceptions. The Holy Grail is potential, student potential. But then, a few years into Big Idea Project, it got personal. I want to invite you into my story. I have 2 children, Noah and Micah, and I love them deeply, more than words can say. But it's Noah's story and my part in it that I want to highlight and share with you tonight. Noah is 11 years old, and if you were to meet him, you would experience a deep, kind-hearted soul who loves to serve, give generously, and he calls out the best in people. He's amazing. What you wouldn't see is the struggle that exists in Noah's heart, because I swear to you, that boy was born fighting. As a small child, Noah was constantly irritated. He would scream at the top of his lungs. and do anything that he could to get attention. He would resort to punching and biting and kicking, even drawing blood. We couldn't control his behavior. It was as if he was at one moment the kindest Dr. Jekyll, and then the next moment, the most rage-filled Mr. Hyde. His true self was gentle and loving. His false self was frantic and grasping and fighting for something he didn't yet know, resorting to lying and hurting people to find it. This continued for a long time, and many nights of anguish and prayers and weeping and, honestly, fear. What scared me the most was that he was blind to what he was doing. He didn't know. He blamed others all the time, and it was never his fault. So I was afraid that he would never be able to see reality. I always loved Noah, but I think at some moment along the way I stopped liking him. And inwardly, I don't think that he liked himself. He had been hearing powerful "you are" statements his whole life that were convincing him that his false self was his real self. Words like, "You're mean, why can't you ever be kind, what's the matter with you?" And then he started to believe them. And then around second grade, it hit me. Could the answer be so simple? But because I had been living in survival mode for so long, I just didn't see it. He needed new "I am" statements to believe. But before I could say them, I needed to believe them too, first. So I had to choose to see who he really was, even when he wasn't. I remember one morning when he had his little backpack on and he was on his way out the door for school. I gave him a hug and I told him that I loved him like I do every morning. But then I stopped myself and I remembered and I knelt down and I looked him in the eyes and I put both of my hands on his shoulders and I said, "Noah, you're kind. You're really good at loving people. You're a good friend and I enjoy you just as you are." And I kid you not, his demeanor totally changed. Noah, in his little backpack, he broke out in this huge grin as if to say, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me and believing in me." The greatest gift a parent can give to their child is to see who they really are. I'll say that again because this is so important. The greatest gift that you can give to your child is to see them for who they really are. Every parent knows that when their baby is born, they have an amazing combination of personality and talents and passions that make their baby unique. Every baby is different from the next, even in the same family. But what's in them at their time of birth is what we call potential. It isn't fully formed, but it's in them. It's already in them. So what does this have to do with school? Well, I know from my experience with students and teachers through the Big Idea Project that schools are not typically places where children feel free to discover their potential and to let it out. We all know this is true. Students are laboring under the lifeless culture of standardized schooling and testing. They're constantly chasing after the next grade or test score. They're forced to sit still for hours at a time, told to ignore their desires to move and play and create and explore with uninterrupted curiosity. They're told to conform. And just like my Noah, they're getting a whole lot of "you are" statements thrown at them. There's a lot of research on the increasing rates of suicide and mental health concerns in children and teens, as well as studies on the lack of engagement and hope. According to Gallup, when students were asked to describe how they feel about school, most said bored. You know what the second most common word was? Tired. Why are our kids so bored and tired? Studies have shown that most students love school until about the 4th grade. Noah used to love to learn. He would do simple math problems out loud in the car at the age of 6. He had an incredible curiosity and imagination. He would come home excited to tell me about what he learned. That is, until about the 4th grade. And then the statistics started to haunt me. Will my Noah start to change too, even after all of the progress that we'd made? I soon began to notice his anxiety of letting people down and his fear of trying new things. He lost his creativity and imagination. His teacher conferences that used to be about his leadership and curiosity, they started to show numerous signs of sloppy work. Noah started to hate school. And sadly, we soon discovered a newly adopted I am statement that still continues to haunt him to this day. I'm only good enough if my work is perfect. School became about the have-tos and the tests that were always trying to outsmart him. And no matter what I said about him at home, what he heard at school was always stronger. Why? Because he spent 8 to 10 hours every day, either at school, getting ready for school, finishing homework, 8 to 10 hours. His worth became defined by what he could and couldn't do at school. What is it about this 150-year-old system that makes our children lose themselves? What we believe influences how we behave. The same is true for organizations and systems. The American education system has one key assumption that is really important to understand if you're to understand why it acts the way it does and why our children are losing themselves. So I'm going to share that with you now. Education believes that it has the responsibility to form children into productive citizens, and that this is primarily done by implementing a set process to meet certain standards so that by the end of that process, they will pass the test and be successful. In other words, who a child becomes is determined by what is put into them. I call this the outside-in approach. But what if this paradigm or this assumption is completely wrong? Remember that concept of potential? Potential is already innate. Every person is born with their own unique mix of talents and passions and personality. It's much like a small seed that houses the potential of a tree. No amount of external forces can form the seed to be anything other than what it already is. An evergreen seed produces an evergreen tree. So, what if the purpose of education isn't to form productive citizens through external forces, but instead to unleash the potential that is already in them? Because inside of every child is a natural curiosity and a desire to learn. It's not that our children are lazy or apathetic. It's that their natural tendencies have been educated out of them. My quest is to help change education to an inside-out approach. This doesn't mean that curriculum isn't needed. It is. Knowledge is vital, but knowledge is more than good grades. It is wisdom, discovery, and purpose. Our role is not to form a child as Play-Doh, but instead to unleash what's already in them, as if we're opening up a window. As parents, we trust the process and the system without much thought. At what point did we believe that the outside-in, standardized, one-size-fits-all approach to developing our children was best? COVID isn't the problem. COVID has given us a wake-up call. So parents, I get you. We're frustrated by virtual schooling. Our children are at home and we're experiencing their boredom in person. Students are forced to sit all day on Zoom calls, stare at a screen, fill out busy work. All the while, they try to find ways to finish as fast as possible because they're bored and tired. And so you and I are joining a growing mass of parents who are discouraged and frustrated and a little bit angry. So now it's time for us to re-enter the education arena. The development of our children is our responsibility first. It doesn't matter what education context your child is in right now, inside of a school building, a home, virtually, homeschool, or something else. This year is bound to have more changes, and I believe difficulties, and reasons for our children to come home and remain home. But through it all, we remain their parents in any context. So COVID is not the end, this is the beginning. Instead of following fear, let's focus on their potential. Okay, close your eyes with me. Picture your child right now. Bring to mind what you know about them. What do they love to do? How do they like to move and interact? Do they have an addictive laugh? A desire to dance every time there's music? Can they make people feel welcome? Or can they see details that others often miss? What makes your child unique and special? Now, forget for a moment that classrooms and never-ending Zoom calls even exist. Imagine your child outside of the walls, doing what they love to do. What does this sort of freedom look like on their face? What does it feel like in their heart? What might they be saying and singing and doing with their hands? Allow yourself to dream with them. Who might they be like if you helped them feel free to learn? How could this change their future work forever? It's not about battles for homework or checking the boxes or meeting requirements or keeping up appearances. Parents, this is about learning. How might a paradigm shift put your child on an entirely different trajectory? And how might that impact our nation? It's never too late to help your child discover who they are. Here's what I've been personally doing with Noah and Micah as we engage in different types of learning this year. And I think these 4 practical steps will help you too. So first, start here. Know your community. Who can you lean on and who can you help? This is going to be a tough year, you guys. Who's your people? Can you find some people who live near you and consider making Big Idea Project part of your community? Second, get to know your child and learn to like them. Show them that they're important to you. This means that you're going to need to do the hard things like reprioritize your time or set hard rules about technology, set boundaries around what voices they listen to. When you are in the middle of a battle, be patient and show them that you believe in them, in their true self. Give up your time and your control and let them find their way back. Third, find experiences and engage in projects. How have children always learned throughout history? Before we overstandardized the organic act of learning, it was always through experiences and doing stuff. Guide them to get their hands dirty. And from my experience, especially, help them focus on projects that involve helping others so that they can develop empathy. And here's the 4th tip, and I've said it over and over, and I'll say it again. Do not listen to fear. The responsibility of educating children is not just for the professional teachers. It's really too heavy for them to carry on their own. This responsibility rests on all of us. Parents, yes, but also singles, grandparents, business leaders, neighbors, everyone. We are all teachers. So then what does that mean? What can you do to help? What do you have to offer? Well, perhaps there's some ideas. Perhaps you're great at math and you can tutor, or maybe you know how to build prototypes, or you can weld, or you can woodwork, or you can read a story with different voices that makes the story come to life. Maybe you're great at coaching soccer, or you can identify all of the types of plants on a nature walk. Perhaps you can work with a few kids on your street. Help a neighbor who's a single parent, or reach out to a coworker who's struggling. It might just be an hour out of your day, but it could make all of the difference for a child who is secretly searching for meaningful work with others. Over the last 7 years, I've seen a taste of how this can look. Big Idea Project has created an ecosystem where companies and communities merge with the classroom to provide experiences outside of school that change students. I want to quickly show you how some of our sponsors provided real-world learning for students this year, even in the midst of COVID.
Big Idea Project believes that the education of an entire generation should not be separated, but instead incorporated into all of society. We are all responsible for raising up the next generation. This year, our community generously gave back to BIP high school students during a summer of change and disappointment like none other, in spite of the difficulties of the pandemic. This is generous leadership in action. Business leaders, civil servants, neighbors, and friends of Big Idea Project finding ways to teach students through example and life-shifting experiences. There is nothing more inspiring to young people than receiving time and guidance from caring adults. The Big Idea Project ecosystem is growing stronger. By continuing to come together with the understanding that we are all teachers, we can unleash the potential of an entire generation to learn and to lead.
I invite you to join with us, to choose a community of hope rather than fear. Just as we rolled out rapid innovations last March, just 6 days after COVID closed schools, Big Idea Project is working on producing rapid innovations for you now, taking our BIP way and creating resources and communities where you and your child can explore and learn and grow together. We're launching our first 2 online community-based courses tonight, and you'll learn more about those in just a few minutes. Our quest up the education mountain is possible, but it starts with being humble and taking time to set aside false expectations to really see our children. And to Noah, I know that you're listening right now. Thank you for letting me tell our story. I want you to know, Noah, that I like you just as you are, apart from anything that you do or don't do. I see you, Noah. I see the real Noah. And I will keep trying to make the time for you to be you because I believe in you. And I always will. Friends, it is possible to unleash the potential of our children and of an entire generation to become the learners and the leaders that they were meant to be. I believe school is going to look a little different, actually maybe a lot different, after this moment in history, if we choose to forge a new way together, because we are all teachers.